Killing Time, Strife Kolony, NeoFuturism by Steve Metcalf from CCRU's Abstract Culture Swarm No. 2. This text from CCRU.net. Killing Time, Neo-Futurist Instructions for Operations in a War Zone. Axiom 1. Command of space metricizes duration in the distributed temporal segmentarity of counterinsurgent imperial metastasis. Phase 1, 1939, Berlin. Rhizomaniacs decouple tank war Europa from its simulation in the underground beer halls of emasculated Weimar democracy, plugging the deliometers of total mobilization into a megamachine of mass death. 1946, French Indochina. It washes ashore in the oil-slick geostrategy of ethnic cleansing in 3 movements. 1. Establish a system of strong points, microfascisms. 2. Spread pacification forces out into a gridwork of small territorial boxes. 3. Comb each square, from periphery to core, with the aim of netting insurgent forces at close quarters and drawing them into prepared killing zones. Space invaders strung out across the rice paddies, occupying space in encirclement and suppression campaigns, geoeugenic anti-infestation measures, flea control. As the slick advances, the front disperses, converting vast expanses of territory into expanding periphery, always already infested with insectoid guerrillas, broadening the insurgent target area. On the strategic defensive in Phase 1. Quote, analogically, the gorilla fights the war of the flea, and his military enemy suffers a dog's disadvantages. Too much to defend, too small, ubiquitous, and agile an enemy to come to grips with. If the war continues long enough, the dog succumbs to exhaustion and anemia without ever having found anything on which to close its jaws or to rake its claws. End quote from Robert Tabor's The War of the Flea. Inexact but rigorous aims of guerrilla fighters, attack to defend, alternated with long periods of catatonic inactivity. Procure weapons, capture ammunition, kill time, force the enemy to overextend lines, pick off small units, secrete terror. Quote, select the tactics of seeming to come from the east and attacking from the west. Avoid the solid, attack the hollow, attack, withdraw, deliver a lightning blow, seek a lightning decision. End quote from Mao in the 5-minute assault. Phase 2, Dog Boys assembled in Chopper War USA, Game Boy faces, dromocratic technical transport bodies of amphibious warfare. Kill by strapping on the supple, metallic microhead and diverting selection to the scansion of the central computing eye, scanning all the radii of isotopic space through the visor of the helicopter pilot's helmet. Deliometers gridding telespace interface at a distance in the target selector, sharpening hyperleptic reflexes on audiovisual slaughter consoles, projecting itself quickly, but lacking the imperceptible speeds of insurgency. The whole campaign falls back on tank war Europa. The Euclidean geometry of military space cross-hatching the central lowlands of the geopolitical core, north to south, from the bunkers of suburban Berlin to the Siegfried Line, passing through the Maginot Line and the Atlantic Wall, trans-European Odyssey telescoped into the abattoirs of a common selective slaughter policy. Mobile meat call finally allowing the state's death machines to leave the rails in the delirium of all-out suicide. End gaming sequence 1964. Chopper War USA falters at Ben Tre, on the Mekong Delta. We had to destroy the town in order to save it. Green and fertile paddies and jungle denuded with Agent Orange, napalm, white phosphorus, coloring smooth space with the alienated pixelated lines of a digital wargame. Phase 2 levels the scores. Gridlock, dynamic equilibrium of forces unable to exterminate each other. In the intervals between strikes, insurgent forces create free zones on the edge of no man's land. Black economies making inroads into the white economy of the invading forces. Constant division of guerrilla forces into smaller units, thousands to hundreds to tens, into n-1 units of the numbering number, diffused across an alloplastic vectoral field, looming the faceless horror of omnipresence, infusing softening syndromes into the brain core of metropoid space invader intelligence. Geostrategic Command squanders its logistical capital in launching search and destroy missions against a single, unified mega unit that does not exist. Occupation of the South Vietnam fields is metricized in terms of the hemorrhage of the economy and massive capital bleed-out, speeding up to $30 million per hour. Axiom 2. Control of time smoothes out space into a vectorial multiplicity propagating revolutionary forces towards New Earth. Phase 3. Radical asymmetry between guerrilla swarm and state army. Mere survival is involutionary victory versus the death trip equalization of standing force, converging on the annihilation of enemies in open, agonistic combat. Contracted legal war, governed by international statutes and rules, spills over into escalating genocide as the invading state aim becomes untenable. Hold space melts into the relentless instruction sequencing special forces operations. Kill, kill, kill. Central authority divides into 3 zones. 1. Zone of power. Organic stratometers governing isometric command chains between state and army. 2. Zone of indiscernibility. Segmentometers relating to the diffusion of these chains through a microphysical fabric in optic space. 3. Zone of impotence. Deliometers relating to the insurrectionary flow of mobilization the state converts and diverts without being able to control and define. For guerrilla forces, this 3rd zone unleashes the lines of flight necessary for dispersal in no man's land, yielding control of the ambient, haptic, paranoid time-space of assassination, which overturns Central Intelligence's notions of where revolutionary desiring machines are going to hit next. War on N fronts, which the state cannot win, short of thermonuclear obliteration. Multitudes of imperceptible Do-Kish fighters swarm in haptic space, touching from too close to be destroyed, neutralizing the logistical supremacy of space invaders. 4th dimension intrusion which, quote, reduces central power to the level of a helpless, sprawling octopus. During the hours of day, sporadic rioting takes place, and massive sniping. Night brings all-out warfare, organized fighting, and unlimited terror. End quote from Black Nationalist Revolutionary Action Movement's position paper, 1961. Chopper War USA follows a delemetric line into abolition in the white-hot intoxication of mechanized assault, dispatching patrols into the jungle safe zones of the NVA swarms, gridding space with fire lanes, segmentometers, which break all bonds of the optic stratometers of slick conquest as they are swallowed by haptic space. Mobile rapid response units of space invaders are re-territorialized on the static black hole system of fire bases, waiting in the dark to be picked off, limb by limb by limb, paralyzed in the suburbs and necropolis. The neutralizing space in which the loss of movement for invaders means prolonged exposure to the jungle, infection, and death. Flashback 1945. Telegram 71 exhibits fascism at its apogeic point instant as the despotic stratifier severs its head from the filth of the unworthy mass body in the ruins of tank war Europa. As the Russian tanks close in, Hitler's last order from the bunker decrees the total annihilation of Berlin. Time up, game over. We had to destroy the town in order to save it. Phase 4, Rewind. Dromoscopic Vietnam restarted by the film companies. Biomorphic horror rides solarized atrocity newsreels into the DMZ of the arcade, fusing brain core, nerve, cortex, and movement image and the glutinous screen of the console. Video captured in the Persian Gulf. Virtual war slams airborne cyber delionomes against an immobilized sedentary enemy and UN telespatial media mashup. Desert Storm operators rewind resonating variations of the same captured events in PlayStation Slick War Space, loops of Tank War Europa shots, beneath Panavian fighter planes in smooth blue stratospheric kill zones, sampled shots of helicopter wreckage as foci of maximum arousal and adolescent sex substitutes, the speed of an accelerated lifespan, measured at a couple of $1 million per multiple tactical experiment online. This Chopper War USA is a success, but still, the oil slick burns in the Gulf, spilling out petrochemical jihad, thousands of dead black birds. Feed forward to European Unification Model 2, Great Intercontinental Meat Market Population Regulator. We had to destroy the herd in order to save it, guarantor of Western democracy, and another pitiful, moralistic rant block for the socialist elite. In the arcades, virtual war data bleeds out of telecommercial corporate control, washing amphibious pioneers of the end of the state onto the fractal subdivisions of coastlines of imperial glacis, smearing zones of indiscernibility into the transversal propagation media of insurgent forces, crawling out of gluttonous, liquid, inhuman deterritorium aligned on the future, sharpening hyperleptic reflexes on audio-visual slaughter consoles. Strife Kolony. Name, unit, and number. That's all you get. Earth Command Corps emergency. The pilot's dead. Dog Bite Sham 101. Snake 1, Snake 2, Snake 3. Ace Viper Super Cool Hornet 156 Shadow. Swarm Agency smart bombing the 9 billion names of God off the central computing screen. Memeplex Showa Crew KZ-135, A-Zone L Roxanne, Super B Spix Cola 139, Super Strut Trinity Concept 3, Crazy Cross 110, Ranker's Coke Swarm 911, Telegraphic warnings sprayed in the machinic phylum. A pack named Wolf Wasp to meet Orchid. They arrive red alert. Cool Killer. T1. Braincore Crystal Company Trading Post occupy Terra Nova, capturing the future in long wave, resonating Condor-Teeth cycles, catagenic dialectics of decline and renewal, falling back on the productive forces, all the better to demonstrate a universal tendency for the reproduction of bourgeois surplus value, already waging guerrilla war in the future. Peripheral K-class communism vibrates fibrous tentacles as cones of attraction to the dark side by means of a swarm machinic remix of the Marxian critique of political economy. Purpose unknown, effectuated as emergent havoc, rather than historical destiny, under 3 propositions. 1. The universal propensity to extract reproducible bourgeois/human surplus value is analytically inextricable from seething allopoetic vivisystems. 2. Transhumanist markets, autochthonic desiring machines, and voodoo futures trading are all alloplastic vectors on governing the infrastructure. 3. Catagenic dissolution of the superstructure is imminent to the programming of production. Short of theology and fascism, brain-core capitalism is already virtually extinct. Crippled archangel meat call Europa withers into gray dust on Terra Nova. Insect swarms arrive like fate. Nth dimension intrusion across the spinal thresholds of the Socius. Passing memeplex revolution sequences through the germplasm of evolutionary vehicles. Becoming metallic. Becoming swarm. Unnatural participation as a law in vital bootstrapping imperceptible colonization of new Earth into virtual operativity. T2. Celibate machines reproduce human surplus value, furnishing the bourgeois with recording rights to all of capitalism's operative axioms, bringing organic stratometers, judgments of God governing isometric command chains, crushing down a schizonomadic economic swarm space. Diffused through the microphysical weave of spinal multiplicity, metrophage control command sequences institute the bourgeoisie as the optimal distribution profile for state power. No more dysfunctional despotic masters. Slaves command other slaves in the ravenous stomach of the crystal factory complex. the mutant urogenital servo mechanism calibrated for the reproduction of the capitalist socius in the gambling dens of Terra Nova markets. White Terror. The whites are landing, taking islands in Africa in the dromocratic rush of the mega machine of amphibious colonization. We shall have to submit to baptism, put on clothes and work. The proletariat is exhumed as a worker-soldier automaton, a spectacular species of drone collapsing into atrocity in the optic space managed by the bourgeoisie. A multitude of black bodies, soulless and bent on destruction. Domesticated galleries of inorganic menace. Crystal heaps of virtual anti-organic force stretched out over capital. Disequilibrium degree 0. Builders of cities, professional killers, synergists of first world security. Compressed between spinal levels of brain core strata, the proletariat is smeared into indiscernibility. Data bleeds seeping out towards expanding periphery as metrophage institutes its target fronts. Oil slick endocolonization mobilizes in 2 waves. 1. Meat Call Europa, distributing geo-eugenic single currencies across the Echo Menon, numbering populations as zombies, shunted in the carceral warrens of a trans-European concentration camp. Phnom Penh Year 0. Everything entered on the slate is hereby null and void in the Axiom laboratories of the suicidal state, gridding telespace down gun sights in the royal science of deliometry, attacking the population swarming across its skin like a rabid dog. In the surgical experiment department of the Institute for Hygiene and Scientific Research, white men macrophage vivisect swarm microhead, a miracle of modern science, and then watch as it die. Farmed out as prime EU girl flesh in the Joy Division, Daniela Preleshnik, stripped of a borified extensity, becomes a number, an insect, bug hunted out of existence. Kod Zeknik 135633. Quote, through the wire screen, the faces of those standing outside looked at her as into the cage of some rare exotic creature in a zoo. She was lying naked, her parted knees still strapped to the iron rods at both sides of the table. In the hands of one of the assistants, she saw the same instrument which they had that morning inserted deep into her body. She shuddered instinctively. She wanted to scream, but, as in a dream, the scream stuck in her throat. Her strapped life writhed within her. End quote from Kod Zetnik 135633, House of Dolls. Walk backwards, say nothing. You're being probed for Terra Nova extermination. As Cambodia burns, only 2 battalions of Khmer Rouge infantry remain in the petrified city. 2. Atrocity TV, intersected at Zapruder Frame 313. The president's head explodes. Brain core splatters into ARPANET. Rhizomaniac stealth agencies monitor the accumulation of virtual assassination weapons, becoming insect to graduate miniaturized search and destroy missions, targeting unspecified enemy hives in the future. Special weapons and tactics are sequenced as SWAT, encrypting simulated World War III outcomes on black ice. Celibate machines rewind hypertelic memory through the crystal world of event strikes, global peace, deterrence. Calculated rhythms of airborne atrocity converge in the montages of optimal disaster management, causing events in the future not to happen, even though they have already taken place, retrieved and reiterated in resonating telespace. Walk backwards, say nothing. History runs backwards, from Terra Nova, coursing in reverse down the inclined plane of purposive human teleology into the inert vertebral surface of the perpetual present. K-class vivisystems seep into imperceptibility, constantly interrogated as the silent majorities. The masses implode into an amorphous statistical aggregate, a number crunch black hole engulfing the social and static repetition of the same feedback loops. Unstemmable data bleed, pauperizing the capitalist state. A borified reprocessing of destitution, taking islands in Africa to distribute collective guilt, smeared across social democratic management of scorched urban flashpoints. racist endo-colonization, cannibalizing the technokinetic fourth world of ghetto architectures into a beleaguered stratum, ripe for catastrophe management. Time music creeps across spinal landscapes, marking off no-go zones on New Earth. T3, Red Terror. The capitalist state squirms in the shadow of propagating minorities. Surging up through history, the war of the flea marshals the power of a non-enumerable infinite set. A communist war machine running numbering numbers across haptic space, assembling shock regiments, passing through end dimensions of imperceptibility, targeting the hellbound bulk of Dogman Brain Core. Eyes crystal sunk and awful, blacked out visions of China. Red Army as demonic alliance, counted out in N-1 units of faceless multiplicity. Eccentric and always hiving off into smaller units, beggaring imagination in the nebulous appearance of omnipresence. Flashback 1949. Strung out on the long march, Mao captures a swarm machine on the resonating recording surface of neo-despotism after internal nomadism threatens to flip a social state into an ungovernable colony of imperceptible numbering numbers. Proletarian schizo microhead propagating minorities through hive contagion. Surplus value equals inextricable. The social state confronts the same limits as its capitalist competitors in trafficking optimal crisis management scenarios. Virtual extinction, depreciation of existing capital, peripheral data bleed destroying majority as axiom. Replicating what the captured global war machine sets out to exterminate. Every massacre rallies a minority of the dead minority. Numbered legions of the living dead, swarming towards the hive colony of New Earth. Crisis management of the swarm machine. Internal disjunction managed by the party apparatus goes rhizomaniac in the constant adjustment of population to the target race of the planned economy, and the correct line of Marxist-Leninism as interpreted by the central brain core of the People's Republic. The chairman's voice speeds up into an insect buzz as he speaks. Quote, "Every year our country draws up an economic plan in order to establish a proper ratio between accumulation and consumption and achieve an equilibrium between production and needs. Equilibrium is nothing but a temporary, relative unity of opposites. By the end of the year, this equilibrium, taken as a whole, is upset by the struggle of opposites. The unity undergoes a change. Equilibrium becomes disequilibrium. Unity becomes disunity, and once again it is necessary to work out an equilibrium and unity for the next year. Herein lies the superiority of our planned economy." End quote from Mao Zedong's On the Correct Handling of Contradiction. Categorical imperative. Act as if there were no tomorrow. Collapse into the future. Occupying the sinkholes, taking commerce down into exchange rate mechanisms that clear all markets and all future states of the economy. A miracle managed by the guns of the military command corps. Invasion fleets poised off the coastlines of the black future, taking islands in Africa, washing red flags in the boiling Atlantic. Here we are stranded, but we'll find new accommodation. We'll make plans for mobile homes. Welcome to the Strife Kolony. Still life in mobile homes. Memory as fluid duration distributed across CNS segmented worm and fibrous nerve cortex. Reassembled in Red Army hive mind and crashed in communist pioneer year zero aphasia. Moon over China. Stir of light through dark shoals on jungle riverbeds. Tiles on graves and rotting temples, blacked out. T4. At the end of the river, the special forces are dashed on the reef of the faceless horror of an inorganic colony populated by insect communists. Communists like us. Multitudes of imperceptible do-kish gorillas swarm in haptic space. Too close to be wiped out, even though targeted in infrared and heat-sensitive sniper scopes, magnifying starlight to pixelate concealed enemies. Mobile radar units, biologicals, cluster bombs, smart video war. More dangerous than the regular Chuluk troops of the Red Army, because cut across by machinic phylum figuring multiform units in space-time. Crystal Company SWAT operations fail in K-class no-go zones. Missions dispatched to follow individual units back to the mega hive are picked off by snipers in the jungle. Swarm machines are virtual entities, hive multiplicities swamping organic central control in emergent revolutionary assemblages, pack becomings rushing across the body without organs, propagated by epidemic, express n dimensions of intensive differentiation by running the swarm machine sequence itself, shifting phase into the actual, by which time it's all over for the metrophage. Spiral landscape intersected at T4 dissolves in asymmetry. Snowballing nth dimension intrusion unleashes partisans of World War IV. Auto-satanic transformers as a swirl of metal flies, pulsing contagious heaps as they spill out of evolutionary classification. Crawling through cosmic continua. Involution through various becomings animal, vegetable, mineral, bacteria, virus, molecule, wavelength pulses, digital voodoo codes, into the target selectors of metallic probe heads. Allopoetic black magic, Insuferian communism, sorcerer's diagrams sprayed on the white walls, diagonal arrows routing instructions for anti-strata spillout, proper names, numbering numbers, borderlines of gangsta colonies, fracturing to smaller units as the social fabric rots, segment shifting coordinate points, and dislocating smearing macro face. Cool Killer 666. After all the fasciculated bundles of intensity available to the bourgeoisie have been gathered on the battlefields of crystal space, there are only minutes to go to Terra Nova, phase shift into superstructural extermination as the peripheral vortex heats up. Chaos theory is a wave of arson in a climate of revolutionary emergency. A single spark can light a prairie fire. Mao, war in the suburbs of hell. Eugenic galleries of bourgeois facial pattern recognition burn. Decalcomania. Permanent material damage. Organic security melting away in the assassination fugues of derailed fear. Catabolic vehicles breathe alien intelligence into fourth world swarms. Non-organic imitation of domesticated life. Assaulting the higher levels of organization. Inhuman nebula, setting scales, forms, and screams in continuous variation. Black patch psychosis blinkering crystal core optics. Fixated in the rearview mirror, scans newsreels of piled up corpses. Nightmare buzzing and crawling. Nocturnal escalation of guerrilla war. Sinister K-class menace growing insolent as it pours out of time in order to pass across space. Helicopters crash against a tree line. Discarded dog boy faces hang from tendons in the burning wreckage of Chopper War USA. Phosphorescent vapor drifts across a blasted landscape. Artificial vivisystems choked in Biosphere 2 crystallization. Data bleed into n dimensions. Mechanosphere. From the wailing of elements and particles, to the howling of packs of animals, to the bleeding of Dr. Macrofacial slaphead sociological memory man praying for re-edibilization. Stay with me, no family life. We can learn to fight it. Cling to me, this makes me feel uneasy. We are blacked out in visions of China. Tonight, stood alone here in this colony. In this colony, in this colony, in this colony. NeoFuturism. 0. Beyond the authoritarian mania of modernist econometric planning, and the nihilistic self-referential third cycle damnation of the ultra-modern now, Neo-Futurism tracks a double process. 1. Where the operational political, economic, and sociological codes of universalized humanity contract, to the point where, condemned to endlessly circulate in an interminable statistical survey, they finally collapse into a black hole where meaningless signs reduplicate themselves. This is the secondary process, the humanities in flames. 2. The primary process, where the abstract generic value of human intelligence migrates beyond the madreporic core of an organism regulated by the negative feedback of these archaic codes, becoming increasingly artificial and synthetic at intense speeds, converging on a future in which it has already been rewired. Here, the medium is the message, a viral mechanism accelerating the replication of more of itself. Runaway capitalism, anarchic, headless self-organization, invasion from the future. 0.1. The secondary process, humanism as such, issues from the cold ecstasy of the space mind, the spatializing consciousness which segments and codifies the economic circulation of markets, linguistic signs, and libidinal capital into an organic unity. Under the structural law of value, equilibrium is maintained, under the principle of commutability in the exchange of equivalents. It maps the totality of conditions for experience by asking 1, what is it? 2, where does it come from? And 3, what does it mean? It evokes undead archaisms, which float suspended in cold limbo. Power, the social, meaning, it's all over. But it continues to haunt all the metrics covering segmented space. So many ghosts in the rearview mirror. The codes constitute a stratified death sentence, effectuating all conditions of possibility, legislating by means of semiotic constants, dividing all virtual forms into actual systems of binary opposites, powered by negative feedback, issuing the judgment which allows the only possible metamorphosis. Life passes into death, corporeality into incorporeality, being into non-being. It lives in the past, in dead space, dead time, hard outlines only secreted in death, static cold extermination, secured at the moment of its deconstruction. 0.2. NeoFuturism experiences this sinister verdict as an admonition to flee. It is our passéism, Paris in flames. 0.3. A well-known economist recently wrote that, quote, in order for a competitive equilibrium to exist, each person must prepare a complete list of all future states of the environment which might obtain, and everyone must hold absolutely identical incorrect beliefs regarding the prices which would exist in each potential state of the world at every point in the future. This is a world which, transparently, bears no resemblance to reality. End to quote from Paul Ormerod's The Death of Economics. 0.4. We quite agree, but each person, beliefs, NeoFuturism puts an end to all that. Anthropomorphic environments in flames. 0.5. The environment is imperceptible auto-production, a process, not a container. Human techniques begin as counter-environments, automatic and robot controls, tools for natural and social domination, became immanent to the environment, and spawned a proliferating series of new counter-environments to limit the functioning of the old ones. At least some semblance of equilibrium was maintained in this simulation. Intelligent techniques slipped through the net of counter-environments and out of control, into the harsh swarming of dynamic equilibria. At the end of history, no one will be there to put the brakes on positive feedback systems. 0.6. The main questions are temporal and pragmatic. How does it work? What are the conditions for survival? Econometric divination is completely dysfunctional. NeoFuturism operates as self-generating theoretical hype. It survives or dies on the basis of its trading on its estimated future value. It gambles. The virtual future bleeds into medium-term tactical planning, energizing its selection process, icing short-term consensus and autistic panic, while replicating systems with catastrophic bifurcations, runaway accumulation and/or loss, which send the long-term into oblivion. 0.7. NeoFuturism only searches for these bifurcation points in order to make circuit diagrams which hack into the positive motion of the vortex of postmodern capital. It is the reverse of nihilism. Its negative moment is inseparable from the positive, smooth operation of its desiring machines, producing soft weaponry to overcome possible obstacles. 0.8. NeoFuturist attack depends upon the integral unity of its target. It does not live to mount endless oppositional critiques. It operates as an immanent power of disorganization. It is parasitic, experimenting with the symbiotic conditions for its own propagation into the future. Catagenesis and anagenesis are switched into the same circuit, both storing and detonating explosives. 0.9. Space is obsolete. A cultural ghost for tourists with peasant panoptica set on eternity in a cryonic vat. Idiotic gurglings of futurologists. You and I, we're going to live forever. California in flames. As global finance evacuates a territory and begins to exchange by itself in an orbital virtual dimension, the city is abolished as a commercial center. London in flames, a provincial hamlet at best. 1.0. Content fades. Media themselves loom large on the edge of planetary cyber blitz. Environmental process transfers from ontology to technology. No more human beings, not even in their hybrid cyborg variant, only desiring machines. Cultural studies in flames.